as I said, Devin McCarthy James, and we're just trying to talk a little bit about what's next. So the goal here today is to just start talking about college admissions and financial aid for you seniors who've already applied to colleges or in the process of that. And talk about some of the things that should be coming up for you in the next week, in the next month, and also kind of talking about some of the things that we've been seeing out there with regard to impacts of COVID-19 on this process. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So first, a little bit of technical information. So we want you to ask your questions. You're muted just because we want to minimize some of that chaos when folks don't know that they're unmuted and kids in the background, whatever background noise. So what we would prefer is if you do have a question, if you could please use that chat box to ask questions during the presentation. You can see on this screen where that arrow is, there's a little sort of chat bubble. If you hit that, it'll pop up on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can use that to ask any questions. I'll try to keep an eye on that as we're going, and I'll definitely try to leave some time for questions at the end. When asking questions, it would be great if you could select all participants when you're that way, other folks can benefit from what your questions are and see what other folks are asking. And that way we also don't end up with a bunch of the same questions being asked by different folks. So I'm going to make sure I have my chat box up there so I can see that. Great. And so this is just CFNC. This is what this is what I work for, the College Foundation of North Carolina. We aren't any one entity necessarily. We're actually several organizations that come together throughout the state of North Carolina to provide resources for students on how to plan for college, apply to college, and of course pay for college. And so you can always reach out to me, and my contact information will be at the end of the presentation. But you can also reach out to our website at cfnc.org. There's tons of great resources on there, and you can call in to ask questions anytime. They're available at the customer service line, so the toll-free phone advice, the 866-866-CFNCs. So there's a free resource, and if you're more comfortable in Spanish, we have Spanish services representatives for you also, which is a really great opportunity. So these are just some of the things we're going to talk about. Again, we're assuming that you've applied to college, you've filed your FAFSA, and this is what's next. Making that college decision. How do you make that college decision? Well, you have a lot of considerations. You have to think about the financial piece, certainly. You have to think about the campus resources, et cetera, and just kind of figuring out how it all fits together in the big picture of things. The first thing I want you to be aware of is even though the colleges are closed and it's not ideal, of course, to be making your college decision at a time when you can't visit physically on campus. There are a lot of resources out there, and there are more and more resources coming out every day. So some places to go. Go to the college website. College, especially the admissions website, they are trying to put more and more resources out there. Trying to make your college decision using those campus tours that are online, and then that admissions professionals are trying really hard to provide a number of resources for y'all to make those college decisions. Reach out to admissions to see what kind of, at the college that you're interested in, to see what kind of programs they have. They might be able to hook you up with an admissions professional, certainly, to have an online chat, but also with professors. You might be able to get in contact through admissions, or even separately on your own, reach out to a professor in the area that you're hoping to major in to get more information about that program. Reach out to maybe students. A lot of admissions departments are now trying to feature sort of student ambassadors so that you can have those conversations with sort of the real experts on campus, which is the students who are having that experience. Also, don't discount social media. And of course, hopefully you're already following the colleges that you're interested in on social media. But another really great opportunity is to follow student groups on campus. So if you're interested in playing club soccer, see if they might have a Facebook group or an Insta page or whatever that might be. So look for those groups that you're really interested in, whether it's theater, art, whatever those things are that you're really looking forward to doing on campus. Also, if you're not even sure what those are, you can start with the college website. But look at campus newspapers. Obviously, they're not necessarily coming out with their print versions that go out throughout campus, but they're still posting things online. They're still posting plenty of material and content, and it's a really good way to get a sense of what that community is like. Keep in mind that when you're making this decision, you're considering a lot of factors, and one of them is that hopefully you'll be living there for 4 years, and you want to make sure that's a place you want to spend some time, and it has the activities that you want to be involved in, and it has the programs that you really are going to be proud to be a part of. So yeah, so those are really some ways to kind of try and make that decision. Now, National Decision Day is creeping up. It's supposed to be May 1st. That's this Friday. And some schools are still holding to that May 1st deadline. For instance, UNC Chapel Hill is just still holding on to that May 1st deadline. Some schools have extended their deadlines. So some schools were all initially May 1st deadlines, and they've rolled them back into June 1st, or in some cases even July 1st. Please go to their admissions pages to see if they've done that kind of massive shift to later. But even if your school hasn't announced that they have delayed decision day later on in the season, there's some schools that are offering waivers or sort of granting an appeal to give students a little bit longer. Now, that's not necessarily going to be the really competitive colleges, because those colleges don't always need to do that for their students, because they are going to make their quotas of numbers of students regardless. But it really does not hurt to ask, and the admissions representatives really they are there to help you, and they want to help folks during this time. These are just a couple of resources on the screen here that for full lists, in case you're still looking at larger, want to look at a larger list of colleges that have extended their deadlines. On acceptgroup.org, they've got over 300 colleges that have extended their deadlines. These are national lists, so if you're looking at colleges outside of North Carolina, these might be a little bit more helpful. But the NACAC resource has a lot of different information about admissions status and just what admissions departments all over the country are doing. And that's being updated. Both of these lists actually are being updated every day with more and more information, just to give students more information as things change so quickly as they have been lately. Um, if you're still looking for college options, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out to you. One is that CFNC has something called the College Redirection Pool. So if you haven't gotten into the school of your choice, or if you didn't apply to many schools and didn't get in, or perhaps have been waitlisted and just cannot wait to get off the wait list at this point, the college redirection pool is something where you can put in your information, and it will send your information to colleges in North Carolina that still have open spots. So that would be four-year schools. So if you're still really have your heart set on going to a four-year school and you don't want to look at that community college option yet, if that's you, it would be a really good option to go in and put your information in here. Another thing I did want to say is that if you have been told that you're on a wait list, it's an interesting time. So you might have a good chance of getting off of that wait list this year as compared to other years, just because it's a very different year for admissions. And so there may be more openings for students on the wait list. However, because they've pushed that deadline back at a lot of schools to June or July in some cases, it's going to be a really late admission if you do get in off the wait list. So that's something to consider. And not only Is it going to be late and you're not going to know? But also by that time, any financial aid packages that you might receive at that time of the year may look a little bit lean because a lot of that money has already been granted to other parties. So just something to think about. It's just a different admissions time, definitely. So things to consider. So before you make your final decision, I just wanted to remind you of some of these financial things. So considering your financial aid is really important. And to start even considering it, you really have to know what your cost is, your cost of attendance. So when we talk about cost of attendance, it's all of these things on the screen here. We've kind of separated them into two different categories. Now, direct costs, that's the first thing you need to make sure you can afford. So that is what you're going to get a bill for from the college. Tuition, any required fees. If you're living on campus, you'll get billed for room and board. So, obviously some of that will change a little bit depending on if you're at a 2-year community college or a 4-year university. But those are the costs that you would be billed for. Now, the indirect costs, those are things that you will have to pay for, but you'll have those costs generally spread out through the year in some cases, like for instance, books and supplies. You buy them in the fall and you buy them in the spring, but you have certain times that you're paying for that transportation. That's your own personal transportation. So any of your costs for transportation and also parking. So consider that. If you have a car on campus for whatever reason, you're probably going to have to pay some kind of parking fee. The community colleges are going to be a lot less, pretty affordable, usually less than $100. But some of the 4-year colleges have, pretty high fees, like $400, $500. It just depends. So just know that that's a cost you're going to have to budget for, especially if you commuting for some reason, or if you want to have that car on campus to go home, that sort of thing. And then personal and miscellaneous expenses are also going to fluctuate from person to person. So are you going out to dinner frequently? Or are you kind of more of a homebody? That's going to look very different. Those kinds of expenses. But everybody has to budget for laundry, or personal hygiene items, all those things that you just sort of take for granted when you're living at home. Now you have to provide that at the college as well if you're living on campus. Also, the miscellaneous expenses may include health insurance. So if a student doesn't have health insurance, it will be a requirement at that college, and so that actually may end up being a direct cost because it will go on the bill if a student actually needs that. So I like to point this out because, so there's some flexibility in here, especially for books and supplies. A student may spend a lot more money if they buy new books and new supplies than if they got used books and used supplies. If they maybe rented a book, because there's book rentals now, or even found some of those books at the library. So you can really cut some costs there if you're worried about some of these indirect costs. That's where you can usually shave off a little bit of the bottom line, shall we say. Also, we'll talk about a little bit more about this in the coming slides, but there might be other areas in direct costs that you might be able to save a little bit of money. But this is what you're looking at. This is what the bottom line, and this is found on every college's website. They give a average cost of attendance for students at their institution, and some of them give more information than others. So we're going to look at some of this. So here you can see on the left-hand side, you've got, it breaks it down into different fees, average, again, that books and supplies. Now, $1,200, that is the average that students spend. That doesn't necessarily mean you are going to spend that amount. So just keep that in mind. You can, if you want to trim costs, that's a good area. And then you can see on the top right that that institution doesn't give a whole lot of breakdown. So it doesn't give you a whole lot of information about where you might try and slim some of those costs. So it might not be a bad idea to call that, if they don't have more information to click on their website, to call that institution's financial aid office and talk to them about, are there any ways that we can kind of keep costs down or cut costs a little bit. So that's one way to kind of approach some of that. Also on the bottom right-hand side, that's a community college example. And so that talks about credit hours and how many credit hours, what those costs would be. So they all look very different, but they're on each college website. So I do encourage you to spend some time looking at that information to suss out where you can slim down some of those costs. And so how do you pay for that? What is financial aid? Gift aid is that free money, the grants and scholarships. Self-help is any time that you're sort of providing that, in some way. So it could be that you have an off-campus job. It could be that you have work study, which is provided through federal funds. Or it could be that you took out loans, which obviously aren't necessarily you're paying now, but you will pay later. So that's why it's still considered self-help. And there's in gift aid and self-help, there's aid based on, your attributes, your academic or other talents, or there's need-based aid, which is entirely based on your family's finances. And the way they figure that out is that FAFSA that hopefully you've already filled out. But if you haven't, this is what it looks like. Please do so. It's not too late, absolutely not too late to fill this out. So if you have not done this and you intend to go to college next year, this is definitely where you need to go first. But even if you've already filled it out, just a reminder that it's not only for the FAFSA, but it also has a lot of checklists and resources and just a lot of information for students who are going to college and financing that college dream. I think it's really important to know that. And if you need some additional help filling out the FAFSA, there's actually resources on the studentaid.gov site, videos, things like that to walk you step by step through there. Also, you can find some great information on the CFNC YouTube site. So if you go to YouTube and search CFNC, there's a lot of videos to help walk you through different parts of the financial aid process also. So once you filled out that FAFSA, which I'm hoping you all did, you get the parent contribution plus the student contribution, which is, complicated calculations that go into that. But the bottom line is that it comes up with the EFC, expected family contribution. Now, so that could be as little as 0, or it could be as high as 100,000. It could be anywhere in between, and that's what your family could reasonably be expected to pay for college. So this is where that kind of goes. That's why that information is important. Your EFC is from the federal government, and it will stay the same no matter which college you're looking at, right? That will be the same information, that calculation, but each college will receive that, right? So each college will receive that information and do those calculations, okay? And somebody just commented, that's a great comment, thank you. So the FAFSA is, the FAFSA for next year is based on your 2018 taxes. So the 2018 taxes, would have already kind of come in. Talk about some of the appeals process too later. So as I was saying, the cost of attendance you could see, is different for each of these schools, but the EFC stays the same. So the need is different based on the cost of each college. So just be aware that colleges are trying to meet this need. They're trying to meet your financial need, but they can't all. Their goal is to try and meet that number. And the way they do that is by taking those grants from the federal government, grants from the state, scholarships from the college if they offer institutional money, and then if you qualify for work study and loans you might qualify for, and putting that all together into a package and an offer for you. Just be also aware that if you have outside scholarships, colleges can replace loans with that money. So you have to report that scholarship, and they kind of adjust your financial aid package. And different colleges will do it different ways. So just be aware that offer can change based on new information. Something where you can find your EFC if you haven't seen that on your student aid report. And so that would be, you can find that usually that's emailed to the student after you've completed the FAFSA. So if you've provided an email, it would have come to that email address that you've provided. And you can also, if you haven't seen it and it's not in your email, you can always find it on the actual studentaid.gov site. So you can log into your FAFSA and actually pull this up. And a few things are important on the student aid report, but the key is your EFC is on there, and that helps you sort of figure out a lot of this financial aid stuff, because that's where it sort of begins and ends a lot of times. Then Pell and direct loan estimates, and then any additional information that might be needed. Also, it might let you know that you need to complete verification, and that's something we're gonna talk about. But there's a lot of information on there, so I do recommend that you review this if you haven't already. So special circumstances. So there's a lot of things that can't be documented on the FAFSA. And that, there could be a change in employment. Like we said, that it's based on your 2018 taxes. So, a lot may have happened between then and now. So, that's something that can be reported to the financial aid office. Any of these circumstances are things that, could happen. And, the financial aid offices are there to help. It wouldn't necessarily mean that you would change your FAFSA, because your FAFSA, the 2018 data would still be accurate, right? And your assets that you completed, that you reported at the time that you filled out the FAFSA, would have still been accurate at that time. So generally speaking, at this point, you wouldn't necessarily go back and amend the FAFSA unless your financial aid office thought that was appropriate. Generally, the first step is to call that financial aid office. And financial aid offices are dealing with a lot of calls right now about some of this, unfortunately. So just that they've all got different processes. Some of them might have a form to fill out. Some might require you to call first and they'll send you that form. Some might want a letter. There's all sorts of different ways that they might want information like. So every college is different, but a lot of them are, very busy with this right now. So my best advice is, try to, have documentation of the circumstance that you're trying to sort of appeal to them about on your financial aid offer, and also to have patience with them, because they are dealing with quite a few folks are calling right now, so they're trying the best they can to get to everybody. But definitely call, see what they need from you to start that process, if that's something that you need to do. So we talked about verification. So verification, if you get flagged for verification, you'll get notified on that student aid report. You will likely get an email from your colleges letting you know that you need to complete this process. If they need, they'll just basically need copies of documentation that for items that you completed, used to complete the FAFSA. So you want to get that to them as soon as possible, because that can hold up your process. So if you got something that said you needed verification, you haven't completed that, please go ahead and reach out to them and get that process completed, because we don't want you to miss out on any money that you might qualify for once all that documentation is in, because it just kind of puts you on hold. Likewise, if they have any other questions about, they need documentation of this, that, and the other thing, sometimes, there's just data that they need, to collect from you. So don't be intimidated by the verification process, or if the financial aid office needs more. I was told by a financial aid officer that just as often people actually, it ends up being that they underestimated something or overestimated, it ends up being in their favor more often, just as often as not. So just don't be intimidated. They just need to go through that process with you. And then once everything is complete, you'll get your financial aid offers and notifications. So hopefully you should have received those. If you haven't seen those, you can find them usually in your email or your portal, if you have a portal that you log into. Then once you receive those and you've really looked at them, we're going to look at those in a second, you want to start responding to the offers of aid, responding to offers of admission, and just complete all the steps that they say you need to secure that aid. And again, notify your campus of any outside scholarships that you might have received. if you receive them earlier, or if you receive them even after you get that that notification, that offer, you need to call them and let them know. So we're going to talk about some offer letters. I'm going to show you a couple of examples and talk about some things that you might want to look at and look for. So your cost of attendance is going to be on that offer letter somewhere generally. Some other things that you're going to see is an itemized list of all the different kinds of aid that you've qualified for, and that's going to look different from one person to the next. Because it varies depending on that EFC and the institution and what they have available. Each person's going to see different award packages. So don't be surprised if you and a friend are both applying to the same school, but your offers look different. Okay, that's pretty common, and especially if you're applying to different schools, those offers are also going to look different, and we'll show a little bit of that information in a moment. Of course, they'll have that reminder. Don't forget to report any aid, outside scholarships, things like that. And they'll tell you what you need to do. So disclaimers about the aid. So they have requirements to receive that aid and to continue to receive that aid, surrounding your academic performance, surrounding, if you have things that you need to complete, like they have a list of actions and that you need to do in order to secure that aid, like an MPN, a master promissory note, things of that nature. So and then any terms and conditions that apply. So we're going to look at a couple of examples of actual offer letters. First, I wanted to make sure that you know where to access it. So you'll receive this generally by email. There's a few colleges that still will send you a physical letter, but most colleges have moved electronically. So they'll either email you the actual offer or email you to access your portal. This is an example of an online portal. This is App State, but all the UNC system schools generally look pretty similar. They generally look like this. And so you just log in and there should be some sort of financial aid tab. In this case, it's the self-service and then financial aid tabs, and it gives you your award information. So this is an example of a community college offer letter. A couple things I wanted to point out. They have this notice at the top. Please do not change any information on your FAFSA without speaking to the financial aid office. Okay, so that's always going to be your first point of contact anytime you have a question about your financial aid, and anytime you think you might have a change that's worth reporting. So start with them. And then you can see your offer is based on your credit hours. So generally speaking, 12 credit hours is considered full-time. So obviously, if you're not attending full-time, the bill won't be as much, and so your financial aid will be adjusted based on that. So just be aware that can change things. And then SAP is satisfactory academic progress. So generally it's a 2.0 or even higher. Different schools have different requirements, but they should list that on your letter. What is it you need to do to maintain this aid? And then it'll talk about, hopefully, it'll talk about how you might get that refund. So again, hopefully you've got enough money if you need it to not only pay for those direct costs, but some of those indirect costs too. So if there is a refund that's coming, they'll tell you how that comes, whether that is going to come by a check or is it deposited into a certain account, or maybe it's like a debit card, credit card sort of thing that they give to students. Different colleges will handle this differently, and so hopefully they'll give you that information on there. This is another paper letter example. It's got a lot of words on there, but something I really like to highlight here is it does give you that expected family contribution. It tells you exactly what that is, and it lists everything out. So you really need to look when you're examining your offer letters. You need to go line by line to see what you're really looking at. And it breaks it down by semester in this example, which most will do that. And it also, you want to make sure to pay attention to which awards are going to be, that gift aid that you're going to, get, and as long as you satisfy their requirements, you'll be able to keep, and not have to pay back, or loans. Okay. And so there's a couple question marks here because it's not specified. So it might be good to just confirm, like LR scholars, that sounds like a scholarship. That sounds like gift aid, but I'm not certain. So I might call the financial aid office just to confirm. In this case, it does look like it is that, but it's never a bad idea to call and ask if it's not clear. And then you've got the loan. So there's a federal loan, the direct subsidized loan, there's an unsubsidized loan. And this is interesting because not all letters will necessarily include this up front, but this has actually a parent plus loan also offered. So they've gone ahead and told you what you might qualify for in a parent plus loan if the student loans, don't satisfy what you all need. Okay. And so this shows the total. You can see the total awards there. And then below it, it says, gives you the total cost for the school. So in this case, the award amount was 42,650, but the total cost of attendance is 41, yeah, 41,660. So that's actually that's pretty good, right? And then right below it, you have, this is what I don't want you to miss, is sometimes folks will list federal work study separately because that's something that they just kind of hold separately. It's kind of a different program to them on that campus. And so this student is eligible to receive $2,000 through work study. And so federal work study means that the student will have a job on campus, and they'll earn that money. Usually, it's sort of paid to the student for those college experiences. Some colleges differently, and they'll give you more information if you're interested in how that exactly looks. I actually recommend really take these opportunities if they can, because not only is it a good opportunity to get some extra money towards college, but it's also a really good opportunity to work on campus and really get sort of connected to the community there as well. So some jobs might be like checking people in at the campus gym, or working at the dining hall in some way. So there's just a lot of opportunities to meet people and really get connected and dialed in with the campus community there. The next section talks about some of the additional information they will need. So we talked about a little earlier, a lot of letters will have things that they require from you in order to receive aid. So that's the list down there. You're going to need those things. And the things that are starred are the things that they'll specifically need if you're going to accept loans. Okay, so make sure to follow up on those, and they should have links to those things on the website. This is just another example. This is one of the electronic examples of an award. And you can see that it's broken down by semester, and you can see accepted. Okay, and so that's really important. One thing that those previous two letters didn't necessarily show on the excerpts we had was that, how are you going to accept this? Online, a lot of the online offers, there's you have to actually, click on and say what you're going to accept, and that you're going to accept those awards. What I like about this, even though it's a very basic award offer, I like that it has the cost of attendance up there. I like that that breaks that down so you can really see everything on one page on what you're looking at, what you've received in excuse me, in aid, and what the cost of attendance breakdown is. This is just another example. It's a little bit of an older example, but it actually, a lot of the portals still kind of look like this. So we've just left it up, and because it still kind of looks like that in a lot of cases. So one thing that I want to point out here is, again, you can see the categories. They have loans, and then they have grants listed out there. So the loans are things you're going to have to pay back. And in particular, you can see that there's the loan, it has the offered column and then the accepted column. And so this student accepted the Stafford loans, and sorry, we don't really have Stafford loans anymore, they're direct loans, but it's the same idea. The subsidized loans, the $3,500, they accepted that, but they didn't accept, and in fact reduced to zero, the offer of the unsubsidized loan. And that's something significant. I mean, I don't know for sure what the student was thinking, but I can tell you what that all means to me. So the subsidized loan, they took all of that. And one thing about subsidized loans that is really fantastic is that they don't accrue interest while the student is still a full-time student at school. If you drop below half time, then you'll have to start repayments, and you'll start accruing interest and all that good stuff. And while you're in school, they don't accrue interest. Now the unsubsidized loans, they start accruing interest when you take the loan. Okay, so that's why it might make sense if you were to reduce one of those loan amounts to reduce the unsubsidized loan amount, because that's the one that's going to, in the long run, cost more due to interest and capitalization on that. So just be aware that since you do have to pay those back, it's good if you can pay back less. And so the subsidized will be in the long run for the same amount taken out, less. So again, there's added language, report. We've talked about this. You'll need to, if you do want to take any sort of loan, federal loan, whether it's subsidized or unsubsidized, you'll need to fill out a master promissory note. More likely than not, you'll have to do some entrance counseling, some debt management counseling, so that you know exactly what to expect from that, and you know what the terms are and how that's going to look. Parents can apply for a Federal Plus loan if there's still a balance due that the family just cannot pay out of pocket. That's based on credit scores, all that good stuff. So just be aware you can find additional money. So if the financial aid package doesn't meet what you all feel like you need to afford college in your family, there are outside loans beyond the federal loans as well. So you need to read all those terms and conditions. There might be information about when you'll receive aid. So that's something to consider. Also, when you're thinking about your finances, that you might need to pay for things up front before the campus actually disperses that money to you. So just find out what the timeline is, because obviously when you're thinking about going to college, you might have expenses ahead of time that you might not need to pay for. So find out when that happens so you can make a plan for that. And read their satisfactory academic progress policy, of course. If you're looking to withdraw from a class, my best advice is to please call the financial aid office first, because obviously your award is somewhat based on your credit and how many credits you're taking and all that. So call them before you do any changes, because you want to know how that's going to impact your award. Bottom line, this is what you're trying to do if you're considering multiple colleges and you're trying to figure out what the finances of each are. You really want to lay it out like this, so you know exactly what you're looking at. So it gives that cost of attendance, campus A, campus B, campus C. It's a range of different costs. Then the EFC stays the same, of course. And then the financial need is what is different, right? And so the financial need, the financial need at campus C is a lot greater than campus A. But when you look at the different kinds of aid and grants and work study, when you really tally up some of the nitty gritty in there, you'll see campus C actually offered quite a bit more in need-based grants. Okay, so that's something to consider, is that some of the more expensive colleges also have more institutional money. They have more money to actually give to students than some of the initially lower costing schools, public schools in particular, right? So at the end of the day, when you look at that, the total aid for each school after loans. You've got loans there, total aid, and then really the bottom lines there are what I really like to point out, because to be paid, right, the Campus C ends up being a lot more affordable, um, in terms of what the student pays, and then even including those student loans. So they have the least in loans and they have the least to pay up front, for that more expensive college. So it does pay to really do this cost analysis and see what this looks like at the end of the day. This student may still want to go to Campus A, and that's great, but it's making that informed decision about what can we really afford, what can we do, and what do we want to do, with our finances to afford the school that we want to go to. Can you appeal? We talked about a little bit about appealing. We talked about special circumstances on when you might appeal a financial aid award. And these are some resources. So you're going to need some third-party verification. They're going to want some documentation of whatever circumstances you're bringing to them. But these are a couple of resources that have been coming out, recently, to help folks that are looking at appeals, that are looking at changes of circumstance. So studentaidpandemic.org is a great site to give a lot of information about financial aid and about some of the things that have been coming out through, legislation about, the CARES Act, which has money for schools and for students that are being impacted, by COVID-19. So it's got a lot of information there. And then formswift.com, in particular, the Swift student section, they've really done some great stuff with appeals. And so you wouldn't necessarily, submit your appeal through Swift Student or FormSwift, because not all schools are going to be on board with that and using that yet, but it does give information about how, if you had to write a letter, for instance, some schools might want a letter, to appeal, financial aid, want a letter. So they have information about how you might write that letter and how you might, go about doing that. So I thought that was pretty good, good information. And then, merit aid. So need-based aid you can appeal because that's based on your financial situation. Now the merit aid is sort of unlikely, to increase, unless you show other awards from similar colleges. So if you have two offers from very similar kinds of colleges with similar profiles, and one is giving you a little bit more, it's worth calling the admissions office and saying, hey, they offered me this. Is there any way you can match that? It just does not hurt to ask. And just know that Congress has delegated the financial aid director as the final, sort of say in a lot of these awards. So you're not necessarily going to, you're not going to talk to the president of the university. He actually can't do anything for you. You're going to talk to the financial aid director in the instance that you're appealing for financial aid, circumstances, things like that. So student loans, it's worth talking about some of these nitty gritty details about student loans. Like we talked about, loans have to be repaid. Please borrow only what you need. Something that's great about student loans is that if you decide you do not want to take the full amount, you feel like you can afford what, to take out less than that initial loan offer. So you don't take out the full amount and you start your year, you start your semester. Well, later into the semester, you find that, well, you know what, I actually needed some more of that money. You can go to the financial aid office, you can call the financial aid office, and you can ask them to take out, money up to the amount of your initial offer. And so that can be really a good opportunity. You can always increase it. So if you can crunch your numbers and figure out the least you really need, I would recommend taking out only what you need. And then, like I said, if you need it later, you can always go back and get some more. And then it just talks about interest and capitalization. So I just want you to think about that, especially in the context of the unsubsidized loan, right? Or certain private loans. Private loans certainly operate this way as well. So you've got $1,000 loan, and then you've got that 4.53% interest. That's the current federal student loan rate. And then by the end of that year, it's actually 10,453 if you assuming you haven't put any payments toward that. And then the second year, it's starts at 10,453 plus the 4.53%, and then ends up it just accumulates. So just pay attention to those interest rates, pay attention to the terms of those loans, because I want you to know what you're getting into. So we talked about no interest, no subsidized loans. This is self-help and it's need-based. So in order to qualify for subsidized loans, you have to have some financial need. Okay, so how much you qualify for depends on your need. Of course, it must be repaid, must be at least half time. All those things are both, common elements to both of the federal student loans. The current interest rate is at 4.53%, but just be aware that those interests go up starting the new fiscal year, so July 1st. That may go up. We may see that go up, may see it go down, but just be aware that those change. And then you start repayment 6 months after you're no longer half time. And so this unsubsidized loan, that interest begins immediately, right? That's the big difference between the two. But this is a not need-based loan. So I think I saw a question before about, do you need to have a certain EFC to receive loans? Well, yes and no. In order to receive the subsidized loan, yes, you need to have a certain amount of financial need. But to receive an unsubsidized loan, that is not based on the EFC of the family. So just be aware that you can still get loans. It's just different kinds of loans depending on your EFC. And so these are the federal student loan limits for dependent students for each year. You can borrow a little bit more each year, pretty much. And that's just, they're trying to set limits because they don't want students to go into massive amounts of obviously loan debt like some folks have done in the past. So they do have limits on what you can take. And then this is the federal plus loan. So like I talked about before, if you aren't able to, if the student isn't offered enough aid, this is sort of to bridge that gap. Parent loans are at 7.06% right now. So just think about that in terms of, are there other loans out there too that maybe you could take instead of this that might be at a better rate? There's opportunities out there. I would just caution you to shop around a little bit. The current federal student rate is at a pretty good rate, but the federal parent plus loan is quite a bit more. So thinking about that, look at some alternative loans and just shop around, do some comparison. So this is the NC Assist. You can kind of see on the chart there, the parent assist loan. This is a state, North Carolina state backed loan. And so the parent assist loan is at 5.25% right now. And if you do automatic draft, it comes down to the 5.0%. Now you need to have, again, good credit to qualify for this loan, but it might be a good option. You also might consider looking at credit unions or other nonprofit sources to see what their rates are too, and see if they have competitive rates and fees and things like that. The MPN, we talked about that. That's the legal document that you need to sign that basically says that you understand you will have to repay that money. It may expire after 10 years. It may be 1 year at a time. It just depends on what the terms of that MPN are. But you need to sign one because you're signing. You understand that you will have to pay this money back at some point. Loan disbursement. Yes, schools pay for direct costs. They pay for the tuition, they pay for room and board if you're living on campus, and then any of those excess costs, excess money from those costs, they get dispersed to the borrower. So we talked about this a little bit before. You can check with your campus on how they do that. Now, holding your spot. Okay, so you've made your decision. You want to do it. Sorry, we had to go through all that thick financial stuff to really think about it. But now we're there. You've made your decision. You know what you want to do. How do you hold your spot? Well, you're going to probably need to pay a fee of some sort. So there's a commitment of an enrollment fee that can be a housing deposit, or it can be a tuition deposit, or sometimes both. Can range from $100 to $250 or more. And so that just be aware that there's this enrollment fee. What does the deposit guarantee you? It holds your space in a class. It might, if it's a separate housing fee, that's holding your space in the campus. Now, again, check your colleges for those deadlines. Some of those deadlines have been altered or pushed back. Some of them haven't. So really check your admitted student information to see what that deadline is for that. Also waivers. So that's something that is very new. So we have this request for enrollment deposit fee waiver. It's pretty great. NACAC has really hit this one out of the park. So if you have difficulty right now paying for your enrollment deposit fee, whether that's tuition or housing based, this can be a really good opportunity. So this is on the NACAC website. I've sent it out to school counselors in the Western region, so they should all have this. But you can, what's nice about this is you don't need to have a printer also to complete it. So if you're having some sort of financial difficulty paying this, I do recommend that you complete this. You can electronically sign it, send it to a school official. Usually it's a school counselor, but they'll accept any school official generally, and they'll electronically sign it. And you can have them forward it to the school, or you can forward it to the school once you have those electronic signatures on there, verifying that you have some sort of economic difficulty paying that fee. What's interesting is that this is so new that we don't 100% know how each college will respond to this. So just be aware, most schools, especially the major schools, are members of NACAC. So they've been made aware of this, but this was only released. So some schools may not have seen one yet. Some may have seen them and have different policies for some schools may have different policies than other schools. So some schools might see this as a total waiver of that deposit. Some might use it as sort of a deferment. So you can defer that enrollment fee until you receive financial aid, and some might see it as a reduction of that fee. So in any case, I do think if you have financial need, it's worth submitting it. It's worth starting that conversation and letting them know that this is a reality for you right now. Some other key things for enrollment, look at the new student checklist if there is one. I highly recommend going to your admitted student site. So there's usually a couple of places you can find this information. So the admissions offices have their website, and they have usually an admitted students page and or a new student checklist on there. And they likely will also have sent it to you. They will also have sent it to you on your your portal. Sorry, I was lacking the word. On your portal. So check for that. I have an example up here of the UNC Chapel Hill one. It's just a checklist of things that students have to do. It has links for where they should go to do those tasks, those items. Just getting you up and running. One of the big tasks on any student checklist will be that orientation and signing up for orientation. Orientation, unfortunately, is looking a lot different this year. It used to be that students would go on campus for a day or two, and you would get a lot of on-campus experience while you learned about campus opportunities and programs and things like that, and courses. Unfortunately, this year that's not looking like it's happening. Most schools have already announced that they're doing online orientation. There's a couple of schools that are still holding out for maybe later sessions, like later in August, perhaps some physical sessions, but most schools are moving to the online orientation because they want to get rolling with students. They really want students to start learning about what life on campus is like, and just getting connected with all the resources and learning about the courses for registration. So usually orientation, I mean, I would say 100% actually, orientation is required for registration for fall courses. So, and a lot of times it's dependent. The timing of your registration window for when you can select your classes will generally depend on when you've had your orientation. So look at those schedules and sign up. Make sure to meet any deadlines for signing up for orientation so that you can get the courses that you need. There's a window of time that they'll give you. They'll usually give you just kind of from this date to this date, or registration is open for you. And just be aware that in-demand courses and time slots can go early. So if it's a very popular course or if it's at a very popular time, those can get filled up. So, obviously, if you can attend an earlier orientation, that can benefit you in that way. I know that orientation signups are open at most, if not all, schools right now. So go online and sign up for a time. At Chapel Hill, I know that you would need to have registered for an orientation before May 15th in order to not get charged an extra fee of some sort. So just be aware that there are timelines, and sometimes there's actually fees if you don't meet those timelines for certain things. So as we go forward, changes and updates. Each college and university has a COVID-19 section on their website, and they're updating it regularly with any relevant information. Sometimes they even have a frequently asked questions section that breaks it down into different kinds of questions that students and families might have. Check your emails. They're trying very, very hard to communicate with all of their students and families, sending things out by email, putting things on student portals. And just remember that campus offices, they might not be open to visitors, but they are operating and functional. Call, email with the questions. Schools are announcing new initiatives all the time. That's the other big thing. That's why I want you to just kind of stay plugged into your school community. Something that I've started doing recently is I set a Google alert. And so that's an easy thing to do if you have a Gmail, to just set a Google alert to let you know whenever certain words are coming out in the news, So that's just a suggestion to think about, to just make sure you're plugged in with what's going on. Check your emails. That's the biggest thing, definitely. So once it's all shakes down, how do you pay your balance due? Okay, so whatever's left, you're gonna pay. You can pay out of pocket. You can pay with a 529 savings plan if you have one of those. Never too late to start if you don't. College payment plan. All colleges at this point do offer payment plans, which is really, really helpful. It's usually you have to pay that within the span of the 10 months of the school year, but some colleges are even considering that as flexible right now. So that's really nice. Recently, Davidson College announced that they would allow deferred payments to happen. So they are actually allowing students to set up a totally different payment plan and not have to pay till 2021. So there's some flexibility, and that's just a perfect example of just keep an eye out for some of these creative ways that colleges are trying to really help students and families. And then, of course, the private student loans. Always be mindful of those interest rates and repayment. Though there's some loans that can actually raise their interest rates up to as much as 18% over time. So just be aware of anything you're signing on to financially. I think that's really important. And don't forget that there's still some scholarships out there. Yeah, many scholarship deadlines have passed, but some out there. There's merit-based scholarships, there's need-based scholarships, and there's still some that are out there, and some have actually delayed their application deadlines in response to COVID-19. So just be aware of that. Something that has already gone past on March 1st, but I wanted to point out, is if you are going into a service field in North Carolina, one of these service fields, This is a yearly thing. So while you're in school, so if you have not applied or if you applied and didn't get the Forgivable Education Loan for Service this year, that does not mean that the opportunity is gone for you. In fact, they do prioritize juniors and seniors and upperclassmen to receive this, but it's a great opportunity. So it's not explicitly a scholarship, but if you do it the right way, it is one. It does end up being free money. So what you do is you can receive money in a form of a loan while you're in school, and then after you've graduated, you work in that field, and the time you work in that field goes to pay off that loan. So you pay in your time and your service in those fields, and so that could be a really great opportunity. And you can find that more information about the specific fields and majors and details of all that on cfnc.org /FELS. So that's a great opportunity for folks. And like I said, you can apply sophomore year, junior year, senior year. It's, I believe, $3,000 for freshmen and sophomores and up to $7,000 for juniors and seniors. So it's a good opportunity for sure. Also, just be aware that some of these need-based scholarships that are still out there, some folks don't apply for need-based scholarships because they think that they won't qualify, but different scholarships have different guidelines. So that's one thing I do want to point out. So one sponsor might set one limit and they want the family's income to be less than a certain amount. And then another sponsor might say, you know what, no, I want it to be less than 100,000 is this example, a different amount. So just don't ever count yourself out necessarily if you see things like that. It's good to do your research to find out what they're looking for and what their guidelines are, but don't be scared to ask those questions because there's things out there for everyone. The pay tab on CFNC, that's there's still a bunch of scholarships that are still open on there. Some of them have gone by, absolutely, but there's specifically scholarships still out there for folks going into the healthcare nursing fields. There's a couple out there for criminal justice, but I would ask you to look for these as soon as possible because some of those deadlines are creeping up. They're coming up pretty soon because May is right around the corner, and some of these have May 1st or May 15th deadlines. So just be aware of that. There's still some out there, but the time is now. Also, want to be entered for a drawing to win $500 scholarship through CFNC Financial Aid Basics or Financial Basics. Sorry, you can create your account and you can complete that. It takes 2 to 3 hours, start to finish or so, and then if you complete it within 80% or better, you're entered into that lottery. And again, that happens on May 1st, so you can get that in before the never pay for scholarship information. Hopefully you've heard that before. I'm going to say it again. Don't pay for scholarship information. Don't ever pay for anything financial aid related. Generally, that's a good sign of some kind of scam. So FAFSA.gov is the site to go to. Don't go to FAFSA.com because that's not the free site. So, and just make sure to check with your high school counselor and see what else is out there. So high school counselors post this information in a variety of ways, scholarship information. So however your counselor puts that out there, if that's a website or if that's an email listserv, but check with that to see if there's any scholarships that are still available. I've heard of a few that had, like I said, postponed their deadlines to May 1st. So that's this Friday, but there's still a few days. So think about what is offered in your community because those are usually the best bet because it's a smaller pool of applicants and they have monies that have to go to local students, particularly some of these civic organizations. Those money they want to keep in the region, in the area. Again, many of the deadlines for institutional college scholarships, that are given by the college, they have gone by, but don't forget to try and look for scholarships in the coming years. Okay, so there's some scholarships that are still out there for you as you get into your sophomore year, your junior year, senior year. There's always opportunities, and so don't forget to talk to your academic department heads and people who have possibly money that they need to give to students. Every year there's money that needs to go to students, but nobody applies. and that is just tragic because there's money out there for folks. There's some other ways to find scholarships. Obviously, there's national search sites, networking, just talking to folks about what they know, and social media, sending out the back calls, so to speak, and saying, does anybody know about any scholarships for a student going into such and such field or whatnot? You just never know what might come back to you. People want to help usually, and so you might find things that way. And like I said, that some of the scholarships deadlines have been extended that were previous. Like I talked about before, there's even Tech. So if you're planning to go to AB Tech, their scholarship deadline has been pushed back to this Friday also. So, and there's a Martin Luther King scholarship that I saw, and that was pushed back. I'm sure there are others. Those are just two that I have seen recently. So also just be aware that sometimes there's scholarship sites, national scholarship sites that are trying to lead you into a private loan. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad loan, but just, again, be careful. Do your research. Make sure you look at those terms and conditions. Here's just some resources. I wanted to make sure you are aware that there's all sorts of net price calculators out there so you can really figure out what you're looking at. collegecost.ed.gov is out there. CFNC has them linked. If you go to CFNC, you search, just use the search button for net price calculators. That's the best way of doing it, I think. And then College Scorecard. This has a lot of great information about average annual cost, loan debt, graduation rates. That can be really helpful information. If you're spending this money, you want to make sure that you're getting a return on your investment and you're getting into a job in your field and you're graduating and all that. So those are some things to look at. And then there's an option on the College Board site to compare your offers side by side, sort of like the example that I showed earlier. So that can be also a good resource. There's a lot of loan calculators out there that you're absolutely, you can find, you can Google some, but there's a lot out there to help you kind of make this decision. But I do think that it's in your best interest to try to spell that out. And of course, studentaid.gov, that has a lot of information. It's always a great place to start when you're looking for information about FAFSA and aid and other things that are out there. So this is just basic information about how to stay connected with CFNC generally, or with me specifically. So you can call into that hotline. The cfnc.org site is a great one to find resources. Right now, there's a lot of stuff on the CFNC YouTube channel that I highly recommend. And then below that is my personal contact information and my social media. So please feel welcome to stay connected with me going forward. I would love to help however I can. That's definitely what I'm here for. Sorry, I was trying to speed through that a little bit to get to these questions because I've been seeing some questions pop up. So let me see if I can't field some of these. Some of these I tried to answer as I was talking. So forgive me, give me a second to look here. I tried to answer some of them. Let's see. So how do we request funds from the 529 account for things like computers that we may need to order online? Do we pay and then ask to be reimbursed? So you can, I would call to there's the 529 hotline and ask them how best to do that. But I do know that you can absolutely use those funds to pay for those items. They have a form, I think a disbursement form, and I think you can likely do it either way. So I think you can ask for the 529 funds to be dispersed and then use those funds, or you can get reimbursed. But check with the 529 folks; they have all the answers. So if you go onto nc529.org, there's a lot of information, and it has forms and the things that you would need to do that. So I see some schools in North Carolina, like UNC Chapel Hill, Duke, and Elon, will require an additional financial aid form called the CSS profile. Absolutely. So there's 5 schools that do that. So UNC Chapel Hill, Duke, Elon, Davidson, and Wake Forest are the only 5 North Carolina schools that will require an extra. It's like the FAFSA, only it's more involved. And just be aware that it's not something that all schools require, and they do charge a fee for it. So if your school doesn't require it, I don't recommend filling it out, but it can be a good opportunity to give information to a financial aid office for those ones that do require that. I will try to share this presentation. Absolutely, I have all your emails, and so I was hoping to follow up with some information and share these resources. Can a student file their own FAFSA? Absolutely, they should file their own FAFSA. There is lots of information, if you haven't done that piece, that you can find. There is on CFNC, there's a lot of information about how to complete the FAFSA. Studentaid.gov, go to those sites. There's some great videos on YouTube on the CFNC site, through Student Aid, on how to complete that process. But yes, a student files their own FAFSA, and then usually there's at least one parent that also has to file the FAFSA. So it's the family's finances, the student and parents combined. So yes, so the parent completes their FAFSA, absolutely. So it's like the student has an account and then the parent has an account. Sorry, I'm reading some comments. Some folks are helping me field questions, which is great. The FAFSA for next year. So this whole thing has assumed I was talking to seniors who are looking to go to college next year and have already in that process. But if you're looking to attend college starting 2021 school year, 2021, 2022, that FAFSA will open October 1st. And yes, you file a FAFSA for graduate programs as well. You absolutely can. It's a little bit different what you would qualify for aid and loans and things like that. But it definitely definitely you should fill out the FAFSA if you're going to graduate school. Again, you can decline as much as you want, so it's always an offer. It never will hurt you if you're going to school at any time in your life to fill out the FAFSA. And the graduate school, generally speaking, it does not include parent information, because usually when you're going to graduate school, you're at least 24 years old. So it could, if in theory, if you were a child prodigy and you were going to graduate school, but most graduate students, it does not require parent information, because by that point, you're generally independent, considered an independent student. Okay, so I think that is all the questions that I saw. And actually, there's one more question that folks were asking. A couple of folks asked me if I could share this PowerPoint, and I absolutely can. I have, from your logging in, your email address. I apologize for the technical difficulties at the beginning, but my intention was to send out information after the fact, either the recording or the slides or both. So I absolutely will send out information to anybody who is on here so that you can get that information, especially to catch up on some things where we had some technical difficulties. So again, I apologize. Thank you for your patience and sticking with me. I know this has gone a little bit longer than we probably intended, but I really greatly appreciate it. And Jacqueline, did you want to say something to wrap us up?
No. How many people did we have today?
It looks like, let's see, I don't have my attendance up.
Does anyone have any questions for me? We thank you so much for being a part of this, and Devin and I are going to work together and see if we need to do this again. This was a first, so like she said, we apologize for the technical difficulties, which really wasn't that bad. I think she did a fabulous job. This is our first time doing a program together. since Laura Meisner retired. And so we're so very happy to have Devin on board. She didn't miss a beat. We can't tell the difference between the two. And she is just as knowledgeable and fabulous and fantastic. So I hope this program helped you a lot. And I'm so glad that you recorded it because there's a lot of the students who are actually in class. I was getting some emails as you were presenting this saying, oh, we're on a Zoom right now. We can't come in right now. And so maybe another time that we'll do it in the evening. We'll try doing it during the day, but hopefully the pandemic won't be a motivation for us to do this, but it's always good to have options. So thank you again. Thank you very much. And we appreciate all your feedback too. I like engaged people, and I was reading all of the information and your advice as well for the things that you know. So thank you so much. And we're signing off. Bye-bye.